This weekend in the main event of UFC Paris from the Accor Arena in France, we have the number one ranked former interim champ Ciryl Gane taking on Bam Bam Tai Tuivasa, your third ranked heavyweight. For Tuivasa, a little bit of a rocky road. Seemed like he was cut a few years ago. He's won 5 big fights in a row. And for Ciryl Gane, his O was taken his last time out against Francis Ngannou in a bid to unify the belts. Francis came out with knee sleeves on and became a wrestler, and it was the weirdest fight I've ever seen in my entire life. And Ciryl Gane looked like he had no answer for it. Coach Fernand Lopez was completely stumped and confused. It was one of the biggest mind Fs of a fight that I've ever seen in my life. Whereas for Tuivasa, he's refined those tools. He's become a more technical striker, adding power in. His last time out against Derek Lewis, he looked amazing. His fight against Stefan Struve, he knocked him out, jumped on the cage, and as he jumped, well, his heel kicked Stefan Struve again and knocked him out a second time after the fight was over. Tuivasa's looked amazing. Ciryl Gane has looked amazing. Again, a home type of fight for Ciryl Gane. MMA was legalized in France back in 2020, and this is the UFC's first fight card in France, so it should be a great contest. But for Tuivasa, mixing things up, and of course, we know his brother-in-law's Tyson Pedro, a guy who's won 2 big fights by finish his last 2 times out. They've been training together. He's really put things together, not just in Australia, but with his time in Dubai, and he's mixed up his fight camps there. Looks like he spent some time there for this one as well. Just what have you made of the progression from Tai Tuivasa from kind of like a knock him down, drag him out, like, I wouldn't even say like 15-10, I'd say like 25-10 type of fighter, to now a guy who's ranked 3rd. I never thought we'd get this out of Tai Tuivasa.
He's still kind of the same. Like, Tai Tuivasa's fighting style is like betting on a roulette wheel. You've got a 50% chance to win and a 50% chance to lose. Like, if he lands the power shot...
Roulette's not 50-50.
I know, there's one that's a different one, Craig. Just hear me out. But for Tai Tuivasa, that's basically what it is. Like, he's going to land that massive hook, or he's not going to land that massive hook and get outskilled. The more interesting half of this fight is Ciryl Gane, I believe. Because, like you said, kind of got mind-fucked his last time out there against Francis Ngannou. Francis showed up with a torn ACL and wrestled like he was Daniel Cormier. Not a sentence I ever thought I would say. So Ciryl Gane in his career, he's at the point of the Manti Te'o documentary where he gets that picture and she's like, I'm not really dead, Manti. And he's like, whoa, I'm supposed to win the Heisman, but Johnny Manziel got it. Like, this is a weird part of Ciryl Gane's career because... if he was going to have any success against Francis, yes, he's a good kickboxer, yes, he's technical, but, like, you'd assume he'd go for one offensive takedown in that matchup against a guy who was wrapped up like Judo Dan Kelly. But no, on the flip side, Francis Ngannou did kind of expose Ciryl Gane as not being a great defensive grappler. And that's the thing about Gane. He's not a trained grappler as much as a learned grappler later on in life. He is very physically strong. He does have some good technique, but he's not somebody who can sweep you off of his back and then end up in a top position. I would even say, and I know this isn't a great example right now because he just blew his knee out against Curtis Blaydes, but like Tom Aspinall's the type of fighter who with his jiu-jitsu background, I'm comfortable if he's on the bottom against some fighters because he'll be able to work his way out of that position. Gane was not able to show that ability against Francis Ngannou, a man who has no wrestling background whatsoever. He's just really fast learner, I guess. But that did leave me with a bit of a sour taste in my mouth. And I do believe that Ciryl Gane against Curtis Blaydes is a much more interesting fight now than it ever was before. But of course, Tai Tuivasa doesn't fight like that whatsoever. So again, for Gane, this fight to me comes down to how confident is Ciryl Gane in his own abilities. Because let's say he is a little bit hesitant. Let's say even in his mind, he's like, okay, I didn't think Francis was ever going to shoot a takedown. Maybe Tai Tuivasa is going to shoot a takedown now. I don't believe that's going to happen. But still, for Gane, that last fight was such an anomaly in his career that you really don't know what version of him we're going to get this time around. I still believe he's the more technical fighter than Tai Tuivasa, even though I do agree with you. Tuivasa's been able to tighten up a lot of his own technique on this recent run, but I do like the kicking game into Ciryl Gane. I just don't know where Ciryl Gane fits in the division now, because I still love his technique. I really like his volume striking. But is he the second best? Because, again, I think Curtis Blaydes has a pretty good claim to being, 2B, I guess, in this weight class, not 2A. But I do think that there's more interesting matchups out there for Ciryl Gane now than I ever thought there was going to be going into that title fight against Francis.
I mean, when I do look at this one, if you look at it for Tuivasa in the recent run, we'll pick on some of these 5 fights. He knocks out Stefan Struve, who
retired basically immediately after.
He knocked out Harry Hunsucker, who came in on really short notice. He knocked out Greg Hardy, which was a really good one because they both threw with power in that one. He knocked out Augusto Sakai.
He did look good there.
And Sakai, poor guy, four losses in a row from a guy who was 15-1-1 at one point. And he knocked out Derek Lewis in a fight where Derek Lewis fighting at Houston used to be a great thing and then all of a sudden turned out to be a nightmare. And Tuivasa looked really good in that matchup as well. So Tuivasa's evolved. He's continued to win. For Ciryl Gane, I see it out there. I see it on the internet, the Twitters, the YouTube comment section. The guy is a point fighter, this and that. And you can point to his fights against Rosenstrike and Volkov to where he's switching stances. He's peppering in his power shots with his non-power shots. He took the power of Volkov in that fight. He did incredibly well. But remember the fight that he had against Derek Lewis where he threw with a lot of power. Remember the fight against JDS where he's landing the elbows up against
was
the clinch.
45.
Remember his fight against Roger Souza, against Adam Dykes over with TKO where he was just throwing with non-stop power. His fight against Tanner Bozer, a little bit more of that point karate style. His fight against Don'Tale Mays, mixing it up at all three levels, taking it to the mat, finishing it by heel hook. We've seen different evolutions of Ciryl Gane's game, and you got to realize, too, this is a guy that had the kickboxing experience coming into MMA. He's only had 11 pro fights, and he came into the UFC at what? 3-0, 4-0, 4-0 at the time. So we have a look at the odds in this one. Gane open to minus 300 favorite, minus 571. For Tai Tuivasa, open plus 250, plus 412. We have a look at your comments in the YouTube community tab. This was thrown out there yesterday. 1,500 total votes. You folks are dedicated. 75% with Gane to the 25% that have Tuivasa. Akash Deep always doing the damn thing in the comment section. I think Ciryl bounces back in a big back with a late finish. Pick him apart at distance, kind of like what JDS did. Mike is saying Gane is an excellent game to counter Tai. He's got every physical advantage and can keep Tai at range all night long, but we've never seen Gane hit with a few solid bombs to the chin. I'd offer a little bit of a counter. Bill
No
says,
one who can hit as hard as Tuivasa, though.
No, but we've never seen Gane hit with a few solid bombs to the chin. Volkov was able to do it. Chad, the UFC dad, new school versus old school. Ty's got to punch his chance heavyweight division, and that's all it takes sometimes. And Russ is saying Cyril's going to piece him up. So, Matt, the fans going with Gane. The odds overwhelmingly going with Gane. I'm also going with Gane, but what do you have to say here?
I'm going with Gane, but I'm going to lay out a game plan for why I think Tai Tuivasa has a much better chance than the majority of people have laid out. And it's not just because of my roulette theory. It's nothing like that. Like, again, Tai Tuivasa, if he landed clean against Francis, would probably knock him out. Like, he would knock out any fighter in the heavyweight division if he lands a clean shot. This is why I think Tuivasa can have a unique advantage, though. Ciryl Gane likes to be really far away from his opponents, or he likes to be really close to them and brutalize them in the clinch. I don't think he's going to have a clinch advantage over Tai Tuivasa, though. I actually think Tuivasa is going to have a lot of dirty boxing opportunities in the clinch. He's got really good elbows of his own, too, in that really close range distance. We saw him finish Derek Lewis in a range like that, so I do think there's a world where Tai Tuivasa can have success on the feet, but again, it's all predicated on him getting on the inside of Ciryl Gane, and the only person who's ever been able to do that at the UFC level is a wrestling Francis Ngannou. So I do think Gane has fought opponents who get him ready for this style of fight, but Tai Tuivasa at plus 400 is kind of a weird amount of odds because, again, for the reasons I laid out, he could win via knockout in the first 10 seconds, he could win via knockout in the last 10 seconds, and he could get outclassed for every single moment in between those two. So I think this is a really fun fight. It should be an interesting fight, but this does feel like a hometown welcoming for Ciryl Gane.
A zig and a zag for Tuivasa. He does have a lot of success behind that black line, up against the cage. Bigger cage in this one as well, but for Tuivasa, we saw it against Augusto Sakai, where that used to be Sakai's world, and then all of a sudden, Tuivasa was able to punch, push him back against the cage, finish him. He was able to do the same thing against Derek Lewis. For Ciryl Gane, he will clinch at the center of the octagon, so it'll be interesting to see how that one plays out. You like the knees, the stance switches, the long-range attacks. For those reasons, I like Ciryl Gane. We have a great main event coming up this weekend. 7 debuting fighters on this card, including a pair of debuting fighters, and William Gomis taking on Jarno Errens to start the card off. If you don't know some of these fighters, check out the videos here on the channel. Monday night, Dana White's Contender Series videos coming out. We do the live video every single time for the fights that are on Tuesday. Some big time matchups coming up. Week number 6 this week. Matt, some great fights coming up this weekend. What are just some of the ones that you're looking forward to?
Ciryl Gane versus Nathaniel Wood is a very important fight for the 145-pound division. Ciryl Gane has been close to the top 15, but he's never really been able to get his feet firmly planted inside the rankings. And for Nathaniel Wood, he was a top tier prospect kind of contender at the 135-pound division who looked good in his featherweight debut, but there's a big difference between Charles Rosa and Charles Jourdain, so I think that's a fight that it might not be flying under the radar, but it's definitely getting the hype that it deserves, hopefully on this channel at least.
Yeah, and I really do think you're not going to want to miss Benoit Saint-Denis taking on Gabriel Miranda. Miranda's jiu-jitsu is of that ilk, but he hasn't fought a good level of competition, and for Benoit Saint-Denis, he's fought that level of competition, struggled against Eliseu Zaleski dos Santos, sent the green mask Niklas Stutz out of the UFC's last time out. That should be a really fun fight. Make sure you check out those videos, support the channel, comment as you can, and let us know who you have in some of these fights, and a like is appreciated as well. We got a great week coming up, and question mark kicks, of course, 2 hours before the prelims on Saturday. You're going to want to keep it locked in with Fight Night picks, and as we always say, let's get into it.